Great, lovely to see you all tonight. Welcome to Animate Earth and welcome to this talk with Daniel Foor about land and lineage. We are super excited tonight to welcome Daniel, who we have crossed paths with in the past, but Daniel is the author of a wonderful book called Ancestral Medicine and also runs a really fabulous site and lots of courses on ancestral medicine, which I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with. But Daniel, you are also interested in animism, which is obviously one of our kind of main interests here. We run a program called Contemporary Animism, which is very much about finding our way back into relationship with our places and with the natural world. And you have a course on practical animism, so I felt that it was around about time that we spoke together just to compare notes. And also you've just moved from the States to Spain, so you're just across the water from us, so it's a wonderful moment to do it, to start our collaboration. So welcome, Daniel.
Thanks so much, Rachel. It's good to be here. It's good to be here with you all. And I would invite you, if you're comfortable with it, to be on video. It's great. It's fine if not to, but it's not a huge group, so it's a nice moment to just share in the connection. And I'm happy to keep following your lead, Rachel, about how you want to set things off with our interaction. Yeah.
Fantastic, thanks, Daniel. Well, really just to say to people that we plan to run for that hour. There will be plenty of chance for questions along the way. We will be looking at the chat, so if you have anything that you want to ask, if you want, Cindy is hosting us tonight, if you would like to speak to her, if you're finding any difficulties, then do that. If you want to use the chat, that's fine. We can't guarantee that we will monitor it, so also we'll take questions personally. So yes, before we start, welcome everybody. Before we start, I'd just like to take a few moments to set our intention for tonight. So if we could just kind of relax into where we are. Spirit of the land. Spirits of the land and the places that we bring here tonight, as we sit in circle in this place. As we sit in this circle behind us, circle upon circle, going back and back into time, are the ancestors who come before us, the lineages that brought us to this time and this place. And before us sit the circles upon circles of those to whom we will one day be ancestors. We ask in this moment for witness as we bring together our lands and our lineages from across the world, to pray for a future of beauty and balance and belonging for all of our kin, for those that are seen and unseen, for those that are human and non-human in our world now and for generations to come. Brilliant, thank you. So Daniel, here we are at last. Land and lineage is what we have decided to talk about, of all the many things that we possibly could. We're interested very much here about belonging and how it's possible to develop relationship with our places, with the land, with the other than human seen and unseen beings that live there. And really the question that keeps coming up fairly regularly is this possible if you haven't got ancestry or personal experience of a particular place? Is it possible to develop that kind of relationship? How important is it to do that, and how would you go about it? I've heard you speak about this so beautifully before, so I would love you to start telling us something about that.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. We'll summarize that in 2 minutes or less. Let me start by situating myself a little bit. I know you said a little, but my name's Daniel. I'm down lineage ancestrally from early English and German settler colonialist in North America. I grew up in the state of Ohio, I've lived in California and North Carolina, and lots of different traditional indigenous people in those respective places. And I live now in La Subia and Granada and Andalusia and sur de España in southern Spain with my wife and our 2 daughters. And I wasn't raised with any framework in any way to acknowledge the cultural mess that is the United States and the double genocide toward indigenous peoples and Africans who were enslaved. I also was not raised with a framework to relate with the other than human folks, with the plants, the animals, the deities, the spirits of land, the places, the Black River and Lake Erie in northeastern Ohio where I grew up, or anything, my ancestors, none of it. So I started off at a double disadvantage in that way around belonging. And not in like a poor me way, it's just a culturally deficient environment. So fortunately, I was able to connect as a young person with LSD and books on shamanism, which did me right as a combination. And it put me, the combination of direct experience through psychoactives, which I don't think are necessary, but that was just my way in, with a sense of I'm contacting something else. I don't know what that is, but it's definitely not me. And I definitely don't have a framework for it. Combined with, oh, here's a framework. Great. And so I, along the way, got a PhD in psychology, got licensed as a therapist, but mostly been studying religion and ritual and spirituality and immersing in different systems, Islamic Sufism, my own pagan European lineages, participant in Native North American circles. I'm an initiate in West African Orisha tradition, and I've made numerous trips to Nigeria and speak a little Yoruba, and some, I'm a participant in those lineages. And I've crashed around with different traditions of ritual arts, made a study of that in a mostly earth honoring, animist, like relational way. And I learned from my time, well, how to be succinct. Belonging is a mess of a topic. I would say that it depends what you're born into, but for me, it's been a mess of a topic. For folks who are down lineage in a settler colonialist way, it's a mess. For folks who are part of an intergenerational like cover up on systemic oppression, it takes some inquiry to get oriented again. And if you didn't get a framework for relating with the rest of life until you reclaim that framework, which is totally doable, you're at a disadvantage because belonging is a function of relationships. You can't personally, in an isolated way, arrive at a greater sense of belonging. It doesn't make any sense. We don't necessarily even exist in a fundamentally separate way. We are co-dreamed up by others. And so to try to increase our sense of felt belonging, which is a good thing to increase, and it really matters for having a fulfilled life and being happy even, and being on track with our destiny and being able to contribute, to be of service through the larger ecological catastrophe we're living through, and just like, how to show up well with your life. It matters. But it's mostly about relationships. And so it means coming back into relationship with this wider field of kinship. So we need some kind of framework for it. And yeah, you want me to keep riffing? I don't want to just monologue, but I could get in a groove, but let me take a breath. How are we doing?
Yeah, sure. No, wonderful. So you talk about coming into relationship with this wider field. So this is something that I know that you do a lot of and have practices for. If you had to summarize, which sadly you have to because we're only here for an hour, how does that happen? How do you help people to do that?
I want to say a thing, and there's a lot of practical stuff around it. on the more, like, the less interesting answer is like, any practices you'll do are the best practices to start with, because it needs to be experiential and not only intellectual. And so find your way in and go there. If you like working with dreams, do that. If you like talking to the plants, do that. If you like gotta eat mushrooms, and eat the mushrooms, do what you can, do whatever you gotta do. Like do the things you'll do, because that'll be your way in. But what I really want to say is, I want to talk about fear and colonialism and control for a minute. I was conditioned as an American white male with a PhD and a developed intellect to be an arrogant loser. That's the conditioning, basically. And I hopefully am not that, but what I mean by that is there's a way in which the mind can become a prison. And there's a way in which intellect and verbal acuity and all that can dovetail into this racist colonialist view that says actually talking to spirits is foolish. It's what less educated people do. It's what superstitious people do. It's not what you do if you want outward worldly power. It's not what you do if you want to be respected socially. It's just not really what you do. It looks foolish. And that is internalized. That's how colonialism feels on a body level, on a mind level. And it also looks like, am I making this up? Is this real? Is all this kind of bullshit? Is this real? Am I seeing this accurately? That's a more specific, understandable question. That's like in human relationships. Did I understand you right? That's a totally practical, normal thing. But like, is all of this real? Am I just making this up? That's a tender question. I'm not minimizing it, but I'm saying notice culturally what leads us to a place to ask, is this even real? Like, imagine if you're in an argument with your spouse and you turn to them, and it's not about like, I don't feel connected to you. You turn to them and you're like, are you even real? That's a weird moment. That's like, whoa, it just got really stranger and less comfortable, because we tend to operate on this baseline assumption of like, okay, you're functionally real, I'm real, we're having a conversation. And when our sense of doubt about the very reality of the spirits, the earth, the ancestors, the others is shaken, that's a vulnerable and tender and kind of sad place to be in. And it's good to notice it and name it for what it is. And so the only way out of that is gradual risking of trusting and be like, okay, well, the signal is faint. I'm doubting myself. It's a little confusing, but I'm going to move as if it's real and allow my doubt some space. That's fine, but we're going to move as if this is real and follow that. And gradually the relationship, the signal gets stronger and stronger. So I say that because being clever can be a way of trying to stay in control and to brace ourselves from the vulnerability of being in actual intimate relationship with others. Because if we're like, well, it's vulnerable enough to navigate all these human relationships, suddenly you're saying the ancestors, the land, the river spirits, the deities, there's no such thing as nature. That nature is a colonialist fiction. It's really just a bunch of other people who don't have human-shaped bodies. And all these others who we think of as the land, or all these other people, they're sources of relationship, and possibly ones we need to give a little attention to or listen to. That can feel a little overwhelming, yeah, and tender. Yeah.
So sorry to cut in there, Daniel.
No, you're good.
Really just to bite down into kind of what your understanding is, though. So you talk about the spirits. Can you just unpack that a little bit for us then? So I guess there's various different levels to look at.
It's a problematic concept in some ways, because spirit is often suggests that there's It's not physically incarnate. It's like spirit as opposed to physically incarnate. And so are we talking about, like, I'm looking, there's a big cypress outside my window here, and I could attempt to attune with the spirit of cypress. Okay, actually trying to do that, give me some space. And is the spirit of cypress different than the cypress tree? Is this Daniel or the spirit of Daniel? Are we talking about the earth or the spirit of the earth? So in that way, it's a problematic construct that divides the world into the seen and the unseen. That said, the word spirit, like the bear spirit, can be a way of signaling that right now I'm experiencing a direct contact with the big organizing community member that animates all the physical bears, right? And so, and they can speak through individual bears, or they can just come to me in a dream without leaving any fur or, claw marks on the walls of my house in the morning. And so there's a way in which the physical and the non-physical are much more on a continuum than the harsh binary of spirit, not spirit. So I find that in English, I'll tend to reach for, like, each language has its own grammar for how to affirm our relatedness with others. English is the only language I speak to fluency. And so in English, it's the language of personhood. I'm drawing off Graham Harvey's lovely work, who's drawing off of Irving Hollowell and other folks, and inspiration from Ojibwe people and Native North American cultures. But the principles are not unique to any one culture. The basic sense is that there are many kinds of people. Humans are only one kind of person, and it's worth considering our obligations and ethics and etiquette of how to relate with these other kinds of people. And yeah, so yeah, something like that.
Mm-hmm. I'm really kind of interested in the way that you think about the conversation with these others on whatever level. And I've heard you talking about the importance of participation.
Yeah.
And I'd love you to unpack that for me. So I've heard you said that actually to belong, to be part of, to be in commune, participation is what is important. And how does that look for you?
There's I want to hold up two simultaneous things. One is that we're fine just how we are. We're enough already. We don't have to be more spiritual, more worked through, or more peaceful, or more connected, or more educated, right? Like we're fine already. It's okay. We're enough. That's a complete truth. It's good to spend time with that and to let that land. We don't have to fight to be lovable. Next, also simultaneous truth, is that sometimes if you want something, you got to lean in and kind of work at it. And that's also true. It's like in a relationship, you might have to invest time and care and energy to that relationship, or it's not going to be nurtured along. You can't grow a garden without planting any seeds or doing any tending. It's not just going to magically happen. And so in that sense, if you want a sense of belonging, there's a need to participate and get entangled and to get to invest in the relationships. If I move here to southern Spain, it's one thing to be here for a little bit. It's another thing to be like, I want to stay here. Besides learning the language, besides, paying my taxes and doing my stuff, there's a question of how can I contribute? Okay, there's a legacy of trauma from the dictatorship. There's an opportunity to share teachings in this or that way. There's, this or that need communally. Looking for a way to become more entangled and to basically say, I want more of a sense of belonging here. Bring me some responsibility. How can I be helpful? If we want to grow our sense of belonging, it's good to contribute in some way. Not in a contrived way, but in a way that's like, hey, Earth and power is here. I want to feel more a part of this family. And sometimes the answer is like, great, you're enough just as you are, and come help with this thing. Or we want you to go sit with this area because there's a lot of disturbance there. And just connect with love there. Just come once a week for an hour. But just stay connected to love in that practice, in that space. And that'll be enough. And then you actually do that. And so trust is built over time. Relationships are the foundation of belonging. If you want more of a sense of cultural belonging, get to know your own ancestors. They'll situate you. And it's different. If you're in England, it's a little different than being here, being there. But at least in the US, at least with, I'm going to generalize to white settler folks in the US. And I think it's true in a lot of areas of European settler colonialism in South Africa, Australia, wherever. There's a tendency to dissociate from one's roots because it's painful. The history is, it's not a pretty one to look at. And the cost of that is a sense of being disconnected from our roots. And the antidote is to face the history and be a participant in the correction. So and to say it another way, from a US perspective, at least if you're white in the US, I would say if you're not in some way working to correct the history of harm toward the land, indigenous people, and African folks, because those are big ongoing harms, you're probably not grounded culturally in the moment enough. And every place has its stories, but if you want a sense of cultural belonging, the human ancestors will help us to get situated in a larger intergenerational story. Because when we think we're an isolated individual, it's like the rest of life kind of backs up from us, like a drunk person. It's like, ooh, this person got a bad case of individualism. They're unpredictable. Yeah.
And in terms of belonging in place, then belonging in the natural world, what would be the equivalents? Can you think of any?
Well, I mean, I think it's just the word adab in Arabic in Sufism refers to just etiquette or politeness. There's an adab or an etiquette of actually just greeting the waters, of saying good morning to the sun and the plants and the earth and the stones, and of recognizing that we are completely dependent and completely embedded. And it's like if one were to interview the stones and the plants near to your home and be like, is this person even looking around? Like, it matters to the others that we're noticing. We humans can be so awesome. Like, we're so capable of mirroring all these different kinds of relationships with visible and not visible to us beings. But we don't always nurture along that capacity. And so it's not about having to, I know I said you can kind of earn a sense of belonging, but the baseline is just validating and acknowledging the many beings. And just like saying good morning. You know how it feels when you're just meeting someone, they start talking to you and they didn't say hello yet? You're like, what are you saying? You're like, I'm back. You didn't even say hello. And so sometimes we're like that. We're like, oh, are you my shamanic plant ally? And the mugwort is just like, oh my God, hello. That's how we do it. There's a need to just be like, oh hi, like let's be friends first. Like you're being grabby, you know. So I think that the rest of life is first interested in a baseline vibe of curiosity. And for most of us, that looks like I've spent a lot of years living in a cloud of isolation and confusion because that's all I was taught. I'm sorry for the harm that that's created, and I want to try it in a different way now. And so I'm clumsy, but I'm participating. So, hi. I'm not sure if I speak mugwort, but hi. That's great. That like start with that, like clumsy participation. What matters though, and I know I started with this, but thinking all day about animism, so to speak, doesn't weigh as much as saying hello. Like if you're thinking about dating someone and you're just like making all these stories in your mind, but you never call them, it's not going to happen. You gotta reach out. You gotta actually like say hi. You gotta see them. You gotta take the vulnerable leap to directly interact. And once you've done that, you're breaking a cultural taboo. You're being foolish and you're betraying the colonialist conditioning that says we don't do that. Other people do that. Well, then, yeah, break that taboo. It's a good one to break.
The relationship from there goes on in whatever diversity of ways that you would have a relationship with a human person.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a relationship with a person. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel. You wanted to bring a practice in, and I'm thinking we should probably do it before we go too much further. Would this be a good moment?
Yeah, well, yeah, sure. Why not? We'll bring it to practice for like 10 minutes or less. I'll talk you through a thing, and then we'll let the questions and the energy of the folks present bubble up a bit and see what you might want to bring. So,
and just to say that if a question comes to you after we've had the practice, then electronic hand on the reactions button, that'd be wonderful, just so that we can spot you. Brilliant. Go for it, Daniel.
So gift yourself a few minutes to just be here. And if you would, start just by noticing your heart and your belly and your feet. Like bring your attention all the way to your body, maybe with your breath or whatever helps you to be rooted in your body. Do that thing. And notice whatever powers you already trust, your connection to the sacred, your connection to love or inner divinity, however it is. Invite that to be present. Invite your support to be present with you. And with that one or those ones present, ask that your space be free or clear from interference, and that there be a gentle layer of protection and containment around your space. And from that place, stand rooted in your body and your center with support. Notice in just a curious way, how much belonging do you currently feel in your life? a kind of spectrum from like, I feel invisible and deeply alone, to I'm the face of the earth and the spirits. We move as one body. Just like, where do you usually hang out? Just be curious about it. Is that more or less than it used to be? How's it been over time? Take a minute and just notice that this is something you do have some choice about. It's something you can prioritize or not. And just notice that it does matter, that how much of a sense of belonging you feel in your life, with the land and culture and in your body and in your community. These things actually matter for your quality of life and your fulfillment and your happiness. And from this place of just noticing what is, be curious for a moment about your connection to your ancestors, especially of blood. You're not trying to connect with them right now. That's a bigger thing, unless you already have those connections in place. But notice how held and supported and woven in with them do you already feel? Do you already feel their backing in a big and grounded way? Is it a big cutoff, somewhere in between? Just notice how it is. And be curious. You could, if you, I was going to say if you could, but you could have even deeper belonging with them. But ask yourself, do you want it? Would you want the greater entanglement and responsibility and connection with your people if it led to greater belonging, but it also meant more entanglement with them? Just notice that there are choices there you could make. No need to do anything different, and no should story that you ought to be doing a certain thing. Just notice that relationship with your own people is one pathway to deepen your sense of belonging. See if there's anything else intuitively to notice about that right now. And at your rhythm, shift attention just a little and notice the land where you're at. Maybe you're traveling, so notice the place that feels most like home right now or where you're living. And be curious about how rooted you are here on the earth and how much you feel in relationship with those ones. Doesn't need to be any way other than it is. But just notice. Do you feel a sense of belonging where you live? Or not so much? And notice that the land and the earth is really a way of referring to so many different others. And that each of those others is possibly a source of relationship, of deepening, of community, of connection. And just to notice that these are opportunities for greater entanglement, participation, and the belonging that comes from that, if you choose to nurture them along. So just notice that option without any need to do anything different. And one other invitation while we're here. Take a minute and notice, to the best of your ability right now, the deeper layers of what you are. That there's soul, spirit, star, self, ancient layers of your being. They're not better or worse than all the identity layers and all that. But notice that you're a lot of things. There's a lot of magic and layers to what you are. And notice to what degree do those layers inform and organize and express through your everyday life. How much is your soul coming through in your daily life? Even if you got to spend time doing things you don't like doing, how present are you on a soul level? No judgment, just notice what is. And notice that affirming and letting these older layers of what you are organize and guide your life is also going to result in you feeling more here and more on the earth, more in the world, more in your body, and more in touch with the magical, weird stuff we're made out of. So just notice that that focus is another way to increase your sense of belonging. And to close out, just take a minute to affirm that, yeah, we're surrounded by invitations from our ancestors, from the land, from the older layers of what we are. And you're fine, just how you are. There's not a need to do anything different. See if you can rest in that sense of being arrived right now. You don't need to try harder. So it's your own rhythm. Shift attention out of practice and allow a little bit of space for questions and shares from those present. And I'd just invite, if you want to share a thing, which is great, to say a word real briefly about where you're calling in from, and then just go to the heart of whatever you would want to ask or bring into the space. Yeah. And Rachel, of course, if there's anything that you want to underscore, you know, that you want to come through, feel free to ask or whatnot.
Thanks, Daniel. Do we have anybody that would like to share or to ask anything?
Yeah, Heather.
Hey, thank you. This exercise was really wonderful. Something you said early on gave me this really interesting sensation. You were like talking about, do you belong? Like, do you feel you're belonging with the earth or with humans or something to that effect? And I recognize so clearly this distinct, I don't belong with humans. I do belong with the earth. And I'm sure I'm not the only one here. So I'm wondering if you could speak more to how do we, for those of us who skew more creature than human,
Yeah.
how do we cultivate the bridge between
Yeah.
that doesn't just activate tons of cognitive dissonance and soul dissonance and stuff?
Yeah. That's a great question. In a real general way, if you're feeling under-resourced, go to your comfort zone. If you're feeling resourced and bold, then you stretch the edge of what you can do in any given moment. But I have found that doing work with the human ancestors and connecting with much older ancestors who lived in a very interdependent and consciously magical and animist, earth-honoring way on the earth. One's in my own lineage. And because we all have ancestors like that. That's helped me personally to recognize I'm down lineage from really good magic and really wholesome, beautiful expressions of humanity. And not only all the muck of the last, 500 plus years and empire and all the stuff, it's a mess, but we're not only that. And the human nature or human other than human split is a really deeply embedded binary. And it's one worth intentionally troubling. That we can know on some level cognitively, well, it's all nature or nature. This is the sound of the earth here having a conversation. There's no, in a way, even to create the category of human, it's most of the way there to human supremacy already, the way human is constructed. And I would say that supremacy mindset, whether it shows up around race, gender, colonialism, class, religion, it's kind of the same mindset. My group, my gender, my nation, my language, my whatever socioeconomic class, people with money are better than whatever, fill in the blank. When it's the same pattern, when it's like humans are kind of the best. And when it flips into humans are the worst, it's still human centering. And as soon as when it's like, cis hetero white dudes are the worst, it's still white centering. it's still we're still in the same binary. And so what I would say is there's a way that we can appeal to our ancestors to help us to heal the rift. And by showing us in our bones and in our body that there are other ways of being that are tender and magical and earth connected and life affirming and not so unkind and dangerous, because humans are the most dangerous animal by far. There's no minimizing of that. And it's really honest to just be like, ooh, I've inherited a lot of cultural trauma that's not metabolized. This sucks. What do I do with it? Well, it doesn't get healed individually. It's not an individual problem. It's a group level thing we've inherited. So coming back into relationship with the older ancestors who are also, they live in the present, they're not in the past, and they're in touch with the land and spirits and all that, then for me, at least, those have been my most primary teachers in knowing how to get some breathing room from that hard binary conceptually and then emotionally with the kind of trauma edge beneath it. Does that speak to it a little bit? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, human society is tough.
Yeah, and
So
it's good to name, like, most human society most of the time is tough.
Yeah.
And there's people right now like being kind and generous and like making love and having a nice dinner and being silly and just like there's all kinds of goodness happening right now also. So it's not that you don't know that, but it's a way of it's not naive, it's strategic to stay in touch with that, and it's honest. I'm kind of a doom-oriented person myself. I'm kind of pessimistic for people who know me personally, but I was recently like nicely pressured into teaching a short course on joy. It's really like kind of contorted about it, and it was a good edge for me because it's honest for me to have to look at like, damn, there actually is a lot of joy in the world. Okay, I'm a stretch, and so to recognize it's vulnerable to go there and to actually be in touch with tenderness because we're open when we're in that state. And so increasing our tolerance for being in vulnerable states is a good practice.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Jocelyn, would you like to unmute?
Yeah.
Hello, or Oki, as they say here. I'm actually from Southern England, is my ancestral roots. Pagan, Janner, and Celtic roots from Cornwall. Although I've lived most of my adult life here in Blackfoot territory. And so my question for you is, I've had to do a lot of works on my own ancestral roots and healing and reconnection. Was sent to do that by the matriarchs here before being invited to go through ceremony. And one thing I've noticed going through ceremony here, whether they be rituals or symbols through ceremony, is that there's so many things that are familiar. And I'm just wondering if you've had experiences like that. Like I danced on May Day with the maypole, and yet when I go through Sundance here, there's a similar ritual. Like there's these interesting threads of connection when invited to go into spaces and share cultural learnings and understanding. So I'm wondering if you've experienced this on your journeys.
Yeah, of course. I'm also kind of a contrary person because as soon as you're like the shared things, I want to be like, no, but it's different. And So yeah, both. I mean, like at each layer of depth, it'll be like, oh, there's superficial things, and you go deeper, and it's like, oh, it's quite different. And then you go even deeper, and it's like, well, same deep cosmic roots. And you go even deeper, and it's like, whoa, different deities, really different vibe, different like part of the solar system. And then like go deeper, and it's like, ah, there's one reality. So I think that dance of things being familiar, things being different, and all that kind of holds throughout the whole, all the way down, so to speak. I don't know. I've been doing ritual and ceremony for like 25 years or maybe 30, which isn't that much in the long arc of a life, really. And but it's enough to be a little bit acquainted. And for me, at least, kindness and courage are really important values, probably in that order, because you need courage and not have any good sense. But being kind and loving with other people is kind of what holds the world together. And we need a lot more of that, because what we're in now and where we're headed is really a really very big mess and very sad. The level of loss that we as a species are heaping upon ourselves and others is really a great catastrophe. Our girls are young, so I haven't even begun to try to speak to it with them much. Speak to it much with them, but within that, I think it's important for us to find this frequency of tenderness and care and responsibility and like fierceness when needed, and to live well despite things being a mess. And that's mostly what matters. And so learning to come back into relationship with the rest of life and the earth, that's good because it's personally better. It leads to better political choices. You don't tend to vote for Republicans and Tories and fascists when you are in relationship with the land and with the many other beings, because you see they're an underrepresented constituency in our current systems.
This kind of brings me back to the animist question, then, Daniel, coming back to that word animism that we probably both of us talk about fairly regularly, but won't kind of bring us many friends. Do you think that given the kind of shape we're in at the moment, that there could be kind of a reverting to an understanding of primary relationship then? Do you think this will happen? I don't really like to talk about hope, that's kind of...
Yeah, it's happening already. There's never been an interruption in that for a lot of people on Earth. But do I think the wayward folks, which is perhaps the wayward majority on Earth, perhaps, can find its way back into a more relational and earth ethical way of moving in the world? I think we'll eventually do it. Humans are so fucking stubborn. Oh my goodness, man, we're stubborn. I wish it were happening more, to be honest. It's hard that it's not the dominant thing going on, but I think a whole lot of people have pieces of the thing. There's a lot of people who are really like class aware or anti-racist or ecologically aware that, have pieces of the thing. And I think it's important for spiritually oriented people to seek political power and to change the systems and to actually seek real, substantial economic and social justice, and to have stable, corrective addressing of the centuries of harm from colonialism. It's one of the most spiritual things that can happen. It's not everyone's vibe to be all politically active. I'm not like wildly politically active, but I think it's very important that we change the systems and that nothing is outside the realm of the sacred. So we need to be just and kind with one another.
Brilliant, thank you.
And have a more equitable distribution of wealth. Make sure everybody's fed.
I think we have a time for one more question. Emma, you had your hand up there. Would you like to?
Hi, yes. Sorry for the lack of video. I'm lying flat on my back dealing with a back injury, so I just can't bear to see myself at that awkward angle. But yeah, I wanted to ask a question that's come up for me quite a lot in the context of sort of ancestral communion. I am Dutch. I grew up in Europe, ended up in the US in adult life, but my ancestry is Celtic. And even before I knew that as a child, I just felt this intuitive connection with, you know, Celtic mythology, what I knew of the traditions and rituals, the sense of like, these are my people, this speaks to me. And yet in adult life, when I'm, you know, like there are different forms of communion that I find a lot easier, but when it comes to communion with ancestors, as far back as I can look over my shoulder at previous generations in my family, I just see unenlightened people, and not evil people, not people who were even complicit in sort of troubling, you know, strands in history or anything like that, but just people who were out of touch. And so there's something in me that just bristles at the idea of like looking back and trying to connect with those people, because I just, you know, get the sense of, well, what are you going to teach me? Like,
Yeah,
so I'm wondering if you can
speak to it.
that.
Yeah. You got to go farther back, basically. My own recent ancestors are like working class Pennsylvania hillbillies, coal miners, and Lutheran farmers. I love them. I respect them, but none of that has a tremendous amount of cultural interest to me. I don't mean it in a rude way. It's just like, it's not exciting to me culturally, even though I'd be like happy to sit down and like share a beer and go for a walk with any of my people. And but my older European ancestors pre-Roman Empire are witchy and edgy and interesting and way more tapped in. And so you got to dial it back before the Netherlands became a weird conservative Protestant, but then not so conservative now, complicated place, and then all the like, you know, the layers and layers, you got to dial it farther back, farther back, farther back. And at some point, you're going to get the older grandmas and grandpas and genderqueer ancestors being like, oh, hey, we see you and we see things you don't even see. And then you're in an interesting conversation because you're in the presence of elders who can kind of see through you and hold you and be like, hey, we see you're down lineage from a mess, but you're not defined by it. It's up in your field. Let us help you to shake it out a little. And that's the strata of ancestry for, you know, in this case, European ancestor folks. I know not everyone here is European ancestor. The strata that is essentially indigenous. It's very like living in the way that indigenous people today live. It's very place oriented and earth connected. So it's pre-colonialism and not all tangled up in the mindset of empire and domination. So if you haven't excavated ancestrally to that strata, that's the one you want to get to. And then you basically are connecting with those ones and asking them to bless and uplift and heal the places in the lineage that have become burdened by mediocrity, obedience, identity-based religious stuff, and, you know, heavy stuff, whether it's, you know, the impact on the soul of a nation for colonialism, like the Dutch are as up in that as anybody, and or whatever it might be. And so,
can I pop a last one in, Daniel, because we're on the subject? It was from Henrietta, who emailed a question in some time ago from a live stream, just saying that she's been advised to perform a ritual and invite her ancestors to come and live in her house, but is kind of saying, well, how can she be sure that those are the ancestors that should come in? And is that a dangerous thing to do? I wondered, as we're talking about strata of ancestors, whether you just had a quick word of, just before we go.
Yes, it's a dangerous thing to do.
Yeah.
But what I mean to say, without discernment, and not to be contrary about it, it's important that if, like, look, I spend a lot of time focused on the ancestors. I train other people to guide ancestral healing work. It's been the staple of what I've been doing for 20 some years now, which is just a way of saying I'm kind of steeped in it. And one of the most important practical distinctions is between the dead, who are deeply well in spirit and rooted in love and wisdom and kindness, and those who are not that yet. And so if you say, I invite those among my people who are deeply rooted in love and kindness and wisdom and vitality and are good for my destiny to relate with at this time, and that are safe and are really just on the level, I invite only those ones to draw near to my life, then you're probably fine. That's the basic principle. And but if it's wide open, it's kind of like saying, I'm having a party and I'm going to invite some people. So it's an unpredictable invitation about who's going to show up. So you want to have discernment. Just being related to someone is not inherently helpful. But our blood lineages, if we can clear the road, are a very personalized entry point to the collective wisdom of our species. And that results in a greater sense of body level and cultural belonging. And that's useful. That's worth spending a little time carving out. And yeah, I see there's some folks in the chat who are practitioners in the ancestral lineage healing work that we were up to at ancestralmedicine.org, and do teaching, and I have a course there. And there's a lot of practitioners of folks of different ancestries and backgrounds. So it's definitely always an option to get support if you're drawn to practices of ancestral earth reconnection. And I want to thank also Rachel and the Animate Earth Collective and your network for the invitation to be here and share with you all a bit. And thanks to the land and the spirits holding each of us where we're at. Well, it's a brief coming together, but I hope that something has been supportive to you. And yeah, anything else, Rachel, that's helpful to name while we're here?
Just to say thank you so much to you, Daniel, for coming to join us. And like I say, now you're just across the water, then we shall be knocking at your door more often. Animism is the thing that unites us, and I feel that the ancestors and the kin of our natural world is a conversation that we have much more to kind of explore. So I look forward to doing that at some point. Daniel's talked about his website, which is in the chat, but just to say that he does absolutely beautiful kind of events and courses on there. There's also our contemporary animism courses and various offerings, and hopefully they are in a similar flow together. So thank you all so much for coming tonight.